The Ravening Monster by Harold Ward. The condemned man raised his bloodshot eyes and glared at the newcomer angrily. Well, you another lousy do-gooder? He snarled. Get out of here. You better come outside, sir. You talk to him through the bars. The guard whispered. He's a bad one. The large man silenced him with a gesture. I've got something for Mr. Fisher's ear alone, he answered calmly. Then as the guard closed the cell door and stepped back out of hearing. No, Fisher, I'm not another do-gooder. Frankly, I don't care at all about the condition of your soul. It's your body that I want. His voice dropped to a husky whisper. They're going to burn you in the morning. You know that. They'll fry you until your insides shrivel up like a bacon in a pan, and then the murderer's fingers, stubby and are all twisted and untwisted like a den of snakes. Yeah, I could choke you dead before the screws could get to you. I've a notion to try it, too. Fat men like you are easy to kill. They haven't any wind. The newcomer shrugged his shoulders. Look, we haven't time to argue the matter. He smiled, stroking his long white beard. He spoke with just a trace of a German accent. We will assume you are incorrect in your statement. Now, give me 5 minutes and I'll tell you my story. He leaned forward so that his voice would not carry outside the cell. I can save you, man. There is 1 chance in a million for you to cheat death. 1 chance in a million. Do you want to take that chance, or do you intend letting the law take its course? Fisher raised his matted head. Say, Bo, you trying to give me... Heh. He pounded his thick chest like a gorilla. I'm bad, I am bad. But what's the proposition, huh? The fat man chuckled. He leaned forward again and tapped the other's knee with his pudgy forefinger. Just this. As I told you a moment ago, they will shoot 3 jolts of electricity into you in the morning. Everything that's inside of you will be burned to a crisp. Heart, liver, lungs, intestines, everything. Me, I'm a doctor, I know. I'm an experimenter, a scientist. My colleagues at the university where I once taught claimed that I was crazy. Crazy because I dared think in advance of the times. Many's the time I've seen them tap their brows when they thought my head was turned. Now, there's the proposition in a nutshell. I want your body. You can sign a paper that prepared instructing the authorities to give it to me after they've wreaked their vengeance on you. You have no relatives to put in a prior claim. If I can get you before rigor mortis sets in, I believe, I say, for I do not want to deceive you, that I can, by grafting within your body the viscera of one of the lower animals. A dog, for instance. I believe I can bring you back to life again. The chance is, as I told you, 1 in a million that I will succeed. But you can, Mr. Fisher, you can afford to take that chance, for you will be dead in any event. So dead the maggots will be crawling between your ribs within a month. The murderer shrank against the wall. Shut up! I am human. I am, even if I am a killer. The fat man chuckled again. I thought the remark about the maggots would put some life into you. That's what they call psychology, my friend. As for you being a human being, I doubt that. The papers referred to you as the beast because of your brutality. You wallowed in blood, innocent blood. You've killed because you like to see people suffer. You like to see people twist and squirm and writhe under your cruel grasp. You love the smell of rich, fresh blood. You are an atavism, a reversion to some prehistoric type. All in all, you were the most brutal killer in the history of crime. The condemned man squared his shoulders proudly. Yes, I am. That's me. I made a name for myself. A name that people won't forget for a while. What? You see what the papers wrote about me? They said that I... The fat man stopped him with a gesture. My name is Kritz. I've got a dog that I've been working with. He's ready for the experiment. He is the same sort of dog that you are a man. He, too, is a throwback. A wolf dog. Kind that chases kayaks around. A wild animal with slavering jaws and greenish-yellow bloodshot eyes. He's an outcast among dogs, feared and hated by all of his kind, even his ancestors, the wolves. But I have nothing to do with this one. The days when he ran wild. He's a killer, too. The sort of killer that sneaks up from behind and strikes without warning. It's his viscera that I intend to graft into your body. If I succeed... He stopped suddenly, leaning forward, dropped his voice even lower than before. If I succeed... And, friend, you can kill again, You can satiate yourself with blood, wallow in it, wade in it, up to your ankles. No one will be the wiser. For Fisher, you, the murderer, Mr. Fisher, the murderer, will be dead, see? In his place will be a new man. But come. The guard grows uneasy. What do you see? The killer's eyes were gleaming balefully. They were the eyes of a man who had been drugged. His face twisted and writhed, his teeth gnashed together like those of a wild animal. His voice was trembled as he stretched forth his hand. Blood, yeah. He whispered half to himself. The chance to kill again. Yeah, the chance to feel warm flesh beneath my fingers once more and hear the gurgle of the dying. Give the paper. Give me the paper, man. Huh? Call in a couple of screws to witness it when I sign. And then get out. Get out before I choke you, fat man. Dawn. A small whitewashed room. Bare save for the curiously constructed chair with innumerable straps and wires attached, which stood on a slightly raised platform in the center of the floor, and the dozen rude benches surrounding it. On them sat men conversing in low whispers. Yeah, the poor devil don't even know his own name, one of the newspaper whispered to the man at his side. Yeah, they say he was conked by a bit of shrapnel over in France, been balmy ever since. Nobody knows for certain, you know. Someone called him a John Fisher, and the name just stuck. He sure is a bloodthirsty wretch, the other answered. And I covered that story of his capture. He cleaned up on 2 coppers when the posse cornered him in the cornfield after he killed an old man Dickinson and his wife with a hatchet. He's a mental case, that Fisher. Government ought to take care of him. You know, they can't prove a service connection. Nobody front for him at the Veterans Bureau, right? Cheaper by a damn sight to say for the state just to fry him than to stick him in a nut house. The entrance of the warden brought conversation to a sudden stop. The official held up his hands protestingly. Stop smoking, gentlemen. Remember, you're here to witness an execution, not a theatrical performance. A man is about to meet his maker. Somebody tittered. He stopped suddenly as the door opened again and the condemned man was brought in. There was a dazed look on his wolfish face. On either side walked a guard. He snarled like a caged animal as they shoved him into the chair and commenced adjusting the straps. Leaning forward, he sank his teeth into hand of one of the guards. The man jerked away with a muttered oath. The newspaper man giggled. The warden frowned. The guard stepped back with a slight nod to the warden. He held up his hand to witnesses leaned forward. The man in the chair strained jerkily at his bonds and then dropped back. Dawn again. In a huge room in a great ramshackle house set in the midst of a dark forest, a white-aproned, pot-bellied man with long white whiskers worked feverishly over an operating table. The odor of carbolic acid and disinfectants filled the air. The old man straightened his tired back and, laying a brightly polished instrument upon the porcelain-topped table beside him, turned to the girl who was acting as his assistant. We win, Greta, my daughter. Ha, 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 we win, he cried exultingly, removing his rubber gloves and throwing them atop the table. He will live. The girl dropped into a chair, her face white and drawn. Oh, but I am tired, she exclaimed. 18 hours without food or water, even if we have one. Father, what does it all amount to anyway? The old man's eyes burned with a fanatical light. My colleagues at the university, they called me crazy. Crazy, me, Alexander Kritz, because I dared to think in advance of them. This man will prove to them whether or not I am insane. No. I cannot proclaim my story to the world because he is a criminal. In bringing him back to life, we have helped cheat the law. Therefore, we might be forced to pay the penalty. But, my girl, we have the satisfaction of knowing that we have done that which no other human being has ever done before. The organism of the dog still palpitates with life, throbs within the body of this man. Absolute quiet for weeks until every union has grown together. Think of it. Soon the rich warm blood will be pulsating through the veins again, the veins that the law destroyed. Think of it, my girl, think of it. The dead will walk again. He dropped into a chair beside the one occupied by his daughter and closed his weary eyes. The rain was coming down in torrents. Ted Tucker, attorney at law, glanced down at his gas gauge and turned the car into a filling station at the outskirts of the village. Oh, no, not the outskirts of the village. It always happens at the outskirts of the village. I don't know if I can go on. Oh, heck, let's go. The station attendant, clad in slicker and high rubber boots, gave him such attention as he required. "Yeah, crazy night," the native remarked as he rubbed his chamois skin over the windshield. "Going far?" The lawyer shrugged his shoulders. "I'll tell you when you've told me something. Where does Professor Alexander Kritz live? I understand that he's somewhere close by." The attendant looked at him queerly. For an instant he made no reply as he slowly counted out the change for a $2 bill and passed it back to the other. "Well, you a friend of his?" Peculiar expression creeping over his weather-beaten face. "Hardly that. I'm his attorney." Yeah. The attendant grunted, leaning his arm atop the open window. "Peculiar old kiss, ain't he?" Tucker shook his head. "Yeah, I know. Never met him. What sort of man is he?" The native hesitated. "Well, folks hereabout don't like him. No one ever goes there. When he first arrived, you made it known he didn't want no company, eh? Comes into town, occasionally buys grub, pays cash for it, and goes on about his business. The girl's just as bad. She's a pretty little thing, all right. She's got a nice car. Buys gas here occasionally, but some of the boys tried to shine to her. She cut 'em cold. They say she got a half-wit living there, too, eh? Maybe he's a relative, man. They're sort of ashamed of. They live in the old Peasley house a couple of miles back in the woods. Follow the pavement there. Straight ahead till you hit a road leading through the woods. Gravel. Take it till you come to a road at the right. Tain't much of a road, but you can get through it with the power you got. Leads right up the house. It's a big tumble-down affair." The lawyer nodded and pressed his foot against the starter. The attendant stepped back as if to close the conversation. Then, as if struck by a thought, he stepped forward again. "Yeah. You know, mister, there's been a lot of peculiar carryings-on hereabout. You're a stranger, so I guess I'd best warn you. Jim Peasley was killed a while back. Throat ripped all to the devil like a wild beast had done it. A few nights later, Lizzie Mumsley, old Miss Dixon's hired girl, she got it the same way. Throat chawed and torn. Sheriff had a posse searching around, but they ain't found nothing. A lot of stock been killed, too. Better watch your step, mister." He stuck his head in through the open window of the car and lowered his voice. "A lot of folks blame Kritz. Oh, I don't see what he's got to do with it. But people will talk, you know." Tucker displayed the handle of a revolver stuck in the side pocket of his raincoat. "I'm from Chicago, man. And there we have guns to cut our teeth on when we're babies. Even the nursing bottles are made to look like machine guns. I can take care of myself all right. Yeah, but thanks just the same." The station attendant shrugged his shoulders and turned back into the warmth and security of his little station. The lights of the machine brought out a side road leading off from the pavement. Tucker slowed down. Gravel though it was, it looked a little better than a track rambling through foliage of two hills. He turned onto it. Headlights showed up every hole in the gravel. Every tiny pond of water, every shadowy stone, making them look more dangerous than they really were. The lightning flashed incessantly, intermingled with steady rumble of thunder. In spite of a windshield wiper, he was forced to travel at a snail's pace. Ahead of him was the wood. The jagged flashes of lightning, which constantly split the sky, brought out every tree and bush in cold relief. Headlights showed the side road turning off from the gravel thoroughfare. He cautiously turned his machine onto it. It was muddy and rough, but as the oil station attendant had said, he negotiated it with little trouble, although he little more than crept along. The storm was increasing its fury every minute. The rattle of the rain upon the top of the car, the steady rumble of the thunder made a medley of sound which the exhaust of his engine took no small part. The temperature was dropping steadily. He recollected too late that the heater was disconnected. He was benumbed, half frozen. The lane, it was little more than a tunnel through the trees, so heavy that the foliage twisted sharply to the left. Ahead of him loomed a huge pile of masonry. The headlights played over the wet, vine-covered stone. It looked like an old-world castle. One window only showed a light. It was dim and blurred, as if the shade had been pulled tightly against the flash. He turned his spotlight against the door. Finally, he located a huge affair of dark wood at the end of a flagstone path edged with bushes and weeds. The whole place, seen through the darkness and rain, had a distinct air of bleakness and inhospitality. He put it down to the storm, and climbing stiffly out of the car, faced the fury of the elements. Outside the car, he found the tumult was worse than he expected. The force of the wind fairly lifted him off his feet. The night was filled with the constant rumble of the thunder and the roar of the breeze of the trees combined with the ceaseless downpour of the rain. The sky was torn by incessant flashes of lightning. In spite of the raincoat, he was soaked by the time he negotiated the narrow path to the door. A man leaped out of the shadow and bushes and cautiously approached. He was almost upon the lawyer. The latter caught a glimpse of him as an unusually bright smoke of lightning split the heavens. A glimpse of a hairy face, of gleaming bloodshot eyes, of lips drawn back over gleaming teeth, and a wolfish snarl. "Are you?" The man leaped back. An instant later, he was swallowed by the blackness of the forest. Tucker shuddered. Turning, he brought his knuckles against the panel. There was no answer. Cursing under his breath, he beat his fist against the wood again and again. From inside came a peculiar clump, clump, clump. Suddenly it ceased. He could actually feel that someone was standing on the other side of the door listening. Angrily, he brought his knuckles against the door again. "Hey, who is it?" the quavering voice demanded. It was not the palsied quaver of an old person, but rather the tremuling voice of someone in mortal terror. "Tucker," he answered above the crash and tumult of the storm. "Is this the residence of Professor Alexander Kritz?" For a moment there was no reply. Then a chain rattled and a bolt was drawn from its hasp. The door was pulled back a tiny crack and an eye peered through the opening. "Who did you say it was?" the fear-laden voice demanded again. "It's Tucker," the lawyer roared, thoroughly angry by this time. "If you're Professor Kritz, then I am a lawyer you telegraphed for this morning. I'm a member of the firm of Tucker and Wakeman. My partner, Mr. Wakeman, was unable to come. If you are not Professor Kritz, then I'll be on my way, and the heck with you. I don't intend to stand out here in this storm all night debating the question." The man on the other side muttered something, and the door was slowly drawn back far enough for the visitor to squeeze through the opening, only to be slammed shut again with the force of to jar the house. The bolt was slipped back into its hasp, and the chain snapped back into place. The lawyer brushed the water from his eyes and stood staring at a fat man dressed in an ancient dressing gown. A man slightly past middle age, with long white whiskers and beady eyes that blinked at him through the thick lens glasses. He was walking in crutches, which accounted for the clumping sound. In his right hand he held a huge revolver, which he covered his visitor with threateningly, balancing himself on the crutches, one foot held several inches above the floor. "Do you always receive your visitors this way?" Tucker demanded. The fat man stuck the weapon into the folds of his gown and extended a hand for him to shake, a flabby fish-like hand covered with red hair and stained with chemicals. "And this beg your pardon, sir," he said, finally gazing at the newcomer from under his shaggy brows. To be honest, I had expected to see Wakeman, and if it was Wakeman, you see, I am in danger here. Mortal danger. God alone knows what danger I am in." He hesitated, then, "That is why I did not let you in immediately. I am forced to maintain a veritable fortress here now." The lawyer nodded comprehendingly. "Come to me at once," the message had said. "Please do not delay. It is a matter of life and death." "Mr. Wakeman has taken suddenly ill. Otherwise, he would have responded in person to your wire. In view of the fact that you seemed in extreme haste, he believed it better to send me than to wait until he was recovered, you see." Kritz shrugged his fat shoulders. Turning, he led the way down a narrow, bare hall lighted by a single kerosene bracket lamp. Suddenly he stopped, and turning to the other, dropped his voice to a husky whisper. "Did you see anything when you came in, or hear anything unusual?" The lawyer nodded briefly. "Yeah, a man. He dodged out of the bushes on my approach. For an instant, I thought he meant to attack me or to speak to me. And as I turned, he dodged back into the forest. Why? I'd heard that you had a man with you who was slightly off." And Kritz halted with a peculiar gesture of his. Never mind. I will explain this later." He led his visitor to a door and, turning the knob, ushered him inside. Tucker rightly surmised that it was through the window of this room that the light had filtered, for a huge desk lamp illuminated all of the vast interior. A partition wall had been torn out between the two large rooms, the result being a vast space filled almost overflowing with books and laboratory apparatus. The walls were lined with heavy tomes. In a distant corner was a sink, in front of which stood a porcelain-topped table. Several shelves were laden with bottles and retorts and other chemical paraphernalia. Tucker removed his sodden coat and hat at a sign from Kritz and threw them across a chair. Indicating another, The fat man motioned his visitor to be seated. He was about to seat himself on the other side of the desk when he suddenly recollected himself. In my excitement, I forgot my duties as a host. You have not yet dined. The lawyer shook his head. I did not stop because of the storm. Grits picked up his crutches and started toward the door. Your pardon, sir. I will summon Greta, my daughter, and have asked her to prepare lunch and some hot coffee. You will need it after your soaking. We live alone, Greta and I, because of the confidential nature of my experiments. And she's my assistant and my daughter. He hobbled another step toward the door, then stopped again. One question. Is a question which may require some thought on your part before it is answered, and is necessary to be answered immediately. I know little or nothing of the laws of your country. What is the penalty for bringing a man back from the grave? A man who has been killed by the law, executed, extinguished. Tucker stared at him blankly. I don't believe I quite understand you. Suppose that I created a man. Suppose that I take a dead body after the law has wreaked its vengeance upon it, and into that bit of cold clay I again place life. Suppose that I find I have created a Frankenstein monster, a menace to society. Have I the right, as its creator, to kill it? Or must I turn it over to the law once more? And if I do turn it over to the law, what is the penalty I must pay for thwarting the law's vengeance in the first place? The lawyer scratched his head dumbly. Was this man insane? No sane man would ask such a question. Your question is more for a priest than for a lawyer. On the other hand, he stopped suddenly. From outside the window came a peculiar scratching sound. It was like that of a cat clawing against the side of the house or sharpening its claws on the soft pine sash. Grits jerked the revolver from its pocket and cocked it, his hand trembling like a leaf in the wind. There it is! There it is! That is Fisher, the beast, the thing that I am talking about. Then came a howl, a long, shrieking, quivering howl. It was a howl of a wolf that has scented fresh blood. Grits cowered against the wall, his fat body shaking like that of a man with palsy. It ceased suddenly. Above the noise and clash and tumult of the storm, he could hear the sound of running feet, of unshod feet. Pad, pad, pad. It rounded the house. A hand was laid softly on the door at the end of the hall, and a knob was turned gently. Then came a puppyish whine, the begging whine of a young dog that had been locked out of its accustomed sleeping place. And then all was silent again. For a moment, neither man spoke. The old man had imparted some of his terror to his visitor. Finally, however, he straightened himself and shrugged his shoulders, although his teeth were still clattering like a castanets. You understand now, he said finally, wiping the sweat from his forehead. You have seen him, and now you have heard him. It's not like seeing an ordinary person. There's a feeling about him, an undead feeling, if you understand what I mean. It's just lately that I've noticed him. I've never seen a ghost, Mr. Tucker. As a scientist, I've always scouted the idea of people coming back from the grave, sure. But you get the same feeling from him that I imagine one would get from a meeting a ghost, an unnatural feeling, a feeling of terror. And now, I will get my daughter. She will come down and prepare something to eat for you. I dared not let her come downstairs before, crippled as I am, and unable to defend her against this awful thing now. I had a fall a few days ago, and I strained the ligaments of my leg. The lawyer turned white, strained face toward him. Sit down, man. Sit down, tell me about it. What is this terror, this thing that is holding you in its grasp? True, I felt it, but yet I do not understand. Grits dropped his trembling form into a nearby chair. That's just it, Tucker. I don't know. When the idea came to me, I imagined that I was doing something wonderful for humanity, for science. Think of it, I said to myself. If I succeed, there'll be no need for death. One can keep going on and on and on. We worked, Greta and I, until we were ready to drop from exhaustion. You've heard of Fisher? John Fisher, the arch-murderer, yes? Well, it was his body that I obtained from the prison authorities. He willed it to me. I promised to make him live again, and I kept my word. Into his empty shell I grafted the viscera of a dog, the meanest, lowest, most vicious animal I could find. A canine version of Fisher himself. He stopped suddenly, leaning forward, tapped the other's knee with his forefinger. His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. Kish, the wolf dog, previously a parasitic scavenger, cursed of his kind, now lives within the body of John Fisher, the murderer. Huh, impossible, Tucker exclaimed. Is it? Kritz demanded. You have seen him? You have heard him sniffing at the window, seeking to gain an entrance? No, Tucker. It is not impossible. I created this monster, and he has gotten beyond me. Isn't it always that way when you create a monster? You'd think they'd learn. For weeks after the operation of joining the two bodies, I kept him under the influence of a powerful anesthetic of my own compounding until every nerve and muscle and tissue knit together into a homogeneous whole. Heart, lungs, everything burned out by the powerful electric current removed. In their place, I grafted the organs of Kish. Just as Burbank created his wonders of the plant world, so I created the wonder of the animal kingdom, a living being, half man, half dog. My great problem was to keep him quiet, so that everything would knit together. At the same time, keep dissolution from setting in. So hard to keep him quiet, keep him speaking in a hoarse whisper, as it were. And that is why I first compounded the anesthetic of which I spoke. And two, I was obliged to use artificial respiration. It was not until 2 months had passed that I dared allow him to sit up and move of his own volition. Not until it was too late did I realize what I had done. He proved at the end of the initial period to be nothing but a mass of flesh and blood with apparently no brain. Of course, the electric current destroyed his brain cells. I attempted to graft a bit of grey matter from the skull of the dog into his brain pan, but apparently without result. Yet there must have been a few cells that lived, since he talks after a fashion and up to a certain point is able to reason. I proved one thing conclusively, Tucker, one thing I have proved. His skull had at one time been caved in. There must have been pressure against his brain. That was probably what caused him to run amok and become the murderer that he was. Again he filled and lighted his long German pipe. Tucker felt in his pocket for a box of matches and a package of cigarettes. Lighting one, he leaned back in his chair and waited for the old man to continue. Suddenly the pipe clattered to the floor as Kritz leaped to his feet and groped once more among the folds of his gown for the revolver. Listen, he whispered hoarsely. Hear him? Above the clamor and tumult of the storm came that peculiar puppyish whine again, then the scratching at the window. Kritz automatically jerked the trigger of his revolver. The leaden slug embedded itself harmlessly into the wall, a foot to the one side of the window. A bestial growl, and the sound of feet padding away in the distance, and a woman screamed. The old man hobbled to the door. He was at the window again, Greta. Have no fear, Mr. Tucker is with me. Turning back into the room, he reseated himself and picked up the pipe with his trembling fingers. This sluggish mass of meat that I have stolen from the grave, Mr. Tucker, is... I hardly know how to describe him to you. He's neither man nor dog. What ugly beast they both were. John Fisher, a bloodthirsty butcher, a killer of the worst criminal type, a man devoid of fear, living only to shed blood. Even in the death cell he cursed and raved like a maniac, and then went to lead him to the chair. He bit the hand of one of the guards and shrieked with pleasure, they say, at the sight of the red blood. He went to his death with a vile oath on his lips. And Kish, the most vicious animal of the north, and hated by man and beast, half wolf, half dog, a slinking killer. The union of the two of them is nothing but an inert gob of fat and muscle, seemingly content to bask in the sun and blink his heavy eyes when anyone comes near. But you have heard, my friend? You have heard, Mr. Tucker. He is not so dumb as he appears. But I digress. He sucked meditatively at his pipe for a moment before continuing. 2 months ago, while I was in the village buying supplies, I learned that one of the villagers had lost a valuable calf. He believed that a wild dog was running amok. I paid little attention to that tale. Then a dozen sheep were killed in a nearby field. Next morning I noticed blood on Fisher's hands, and too there was a peculiar muttony odor on his clothes. I questioned him, but he only grinned back at me idiotically. Exasperated, I yelled and threatened him. He merely cowered in a corner and howled like a little child. I threw down the whip, disgusted at myself. It was asinine to think that this brainless monstrosity had killed those animals. He was as dumb and harmless as the sheep himself. Yet the blood on his hands made me think. And the next, Mr. Tucker, a man was killed. His body was torn to bits, his throat cut and slashed. The farmers searched the countryside for traces of a wild animal, some ferocious beast that was doing the killing, but they found nothing. But listen, my friend. Next morning, when I went to the bowl to wash, I found traces of blood on the sides. Fisher had learned his lesson. He was crafty. He learned to be cunning. I yelled and threatened him again, but he made no effort to fight back. I was still his master, see. He had not yet learned that I was weaker than he. That is true of all the lower animals. In his half-witted way, he tried to tell me that he had done nothing wrong. Again, I was almost tempted to believe him, to believe that he was the victim of some strange chain of circumstances. For it is difficult, my friend, to conceive such a thing, an inert, sluggish mass of flesh and blood, a thing apparently contented to sit and stare aimlessly into vacancy, to believe that such a thing can be so clever, so diabolically cunning. Had I forgotten his record? You ask? No, but remember, Tucker, that Fisher, the arch-murderer, was dead, electrocuted. Out of his body and that of Kish, the wolf dog, I created this monstrosity. I expected something different. And like all experiments, when an experiment turns out to be a failure, I threw the results aside. Fisher was a different sort of man from this thing. A wild animal, ferocious. Kish was of the same type. Only there was a subtle streak in him. This thing of my creation had gone, and none of the characters of I either. No, but I could not believe that this stupid mass, even though a combination of the two, could be the soft-footed, quick-striking thing that was terrorizing the countryside. Again he smoked a moment in silence, and then it was the calendar that revealed the truth to me. One day I glanced at it idly. The thought flashed across my brain that the night the man was killed, the moon had been dark. The night the sheep were killed, there was no moon. The same thing was true the night the calf was slashed and torn and mangled. Some atavistic streak in Fisher, some throwback in Kish, the wolf dog. When combined, causes this thing I have created. To run, to kill, to destroy only when there is no moon. Now do you understand, Mr. Tucker? Tucker leaned forward, his face betraying the interest he felt. I think that I do. It is your opinion, then, that his cuff caught on the window shade. The spring release shot the shade to the roller. Pressed against the glass was a face, the face of a monster. Dark, hairy, with little eyes, bloodshot and glaring, the thick lips drawn back over yellowish teeth of enormous size, was the face of a fiend. The rain-soaked hair was dripping and matted. The nose was flat, the nostrils of extraordinary size. The lawyer leaped to his feet with a shriek. He jerked at the gun in his pocket and brought it to play on the window, but too late. The thing had disappeared. Again he heard the pad, pad, pad of feet in the distance, and then the dismal wailing, wolf-like howling in the distance. Kritz, shaking like a wind-blown leaf, was still sitting in his chair as Tucker, stretching forth his arm, drew back the shade again. What a face! It was the face of a monster, a gargoyle. He hesitated, at a loss for words. The old man took the sentence out of his mouth. Yes, the face of a thing made by human hands and not by the Creator, he said solemnly, stilling his chattering teeth for an instant. I am glad, Mr. Tucker, that you have seen him again. The glimpse you had of him when you entered gave you no conception of what he is. You will understand my problem better now. Remember, too, there is no moon tonight. And that the darkness and the storm is why he is as he is. Tomorrow, should the sun come out, he may be altogether different, a listless thing of almost inanimate flesh. He picked up his pipe again and, filling it, stuffed the tobacco into the bowl with his fat forefinger, his eyes wearing a strained, far-away look. Finally lighting it, he turned to the lawyer again. Since you have thus seen him, Mr. Tucker, I will make the remainder of my story short. Suffice to say that his next victim was an innocent country girl. They found the poor girl, mutilated body along the roadside. I will not go into the harrowing details. Again, it was in the dark of the moon. Resolved to take no chances, I had him locked up, but he broke down the door and made his escape. Since then, he has remained outside. The bit of brain inside his head tells him that he has done wrong. Time after time, I have caught him prowling about, but the streak of diabolical cunning in his makeup warns him that the revolver with which I have armed myself is dangerous, and he takes no chances. Where does he hide? I do not know. It is seldom that he shows himself in the daytime. I've been living in a torment of fear, not only for myself, but also for Greta. Hurrying from one part of the house to another, I sprained my leg by falling. The injury made me more helpless than ever. I have had it in my mind to flee, to take my daughter and hasten to a place of safety, for I am certain that he intends to. Yes, he intends to kill us both. Instinct tells him that I have done him an injury in bringing him back from the grave. How do I know this? That I cannot tell, only I do know it. But is it right that I should go away and leave this thing free to prey upon the unsuspecting country people? I dare not tell them what and who he is for fear of punishment they will mete out to me for bringing such a monster into their midst. He stretched forth his hand appealingly. I know so little of the law, Mr. Tucker. My entire life has been devoted to my scientific pursuits. What can they do to me for bringing this arch-fiend, this man killed by the law of the land, back to life? Tell me. Tell me. Tucker hesitated. Chris waited an instant and went on. That is why I sent the wire to Wakeman. He has always transacted my business for me. It was he who purchased this tumble-down house for me in order that I might carry on my experiments in seclusion. This morning a hunter passed through the woods. He had several dogs with him. Fisher kept out of sight. I took a chance and opening the door, hailed the fellow. I gave him $1 and asked him to send a message to Wakeman. He looked at me queerly when he read what I had written and acted as if he doubted my sanity. I forced a laugh and told him that the message was in code. The words had no meaning to anyone who did not have the key. He went on his way, apparently satisfied. Fisher came out of the bushes where he'd been hiding and started stalking the man. His teeth were bared, his lips were flecked with foam. I thought for a moment that he was about to leap upon the poor fellow. I was on the verge of shouting a warning, but I had never seen him, the beast, act that way in the daytime before. It was the bloodlust, I imagine, or he was hungry. I should have told the hunter, called his attention to the thing that was sneaking up behind him. He would have shot it in self-defense. My problem would have been solved. But something held me back, and then it was too late. For the sight of the dogs drove that monstrous thing back to cover, and the hunter went on his way without knowing the dreadful peril that threatened him. He stopped again, licking his parched lips with moist tongue. I have forgotten my duties as host. He apologized once again. I will call Greta at once. She will make some coffee and arrange a lunch for you. It will do you good after soaking you've been through. I will be gone but a short time, but I must remain with her in the kitchen. I dare not leave her there alone. He stopped suddenly. From outside came a shrieking laugh, a wild, maniacal howl of glee. It rose above the noise and the tumult of the storm, ending in a wild, animal-like screech, the call of a wolf that scents its kill. And then again silence, ominous, portentous silence broken only by the steady downpour of the rain and the rumble of the thunder. Tucker heard the girl come running down the stairs in response to her father's call. That she had been waiting for the summons was apparent. Then he heard the kitchen stove being stirred into life and the clatter of dishes. There was a sudden crash, the tinkle of broken glass, a scream of mortal agony. The dull roar of a revolver, a woman's shrill scream again. It was cut off in the middle. Again, that shrieking, maniacal laugh, and then the wolfish howl. This time it was the howl of the wolf that has made its kill and is sating itself in fresh, warm blood. Tucker leaped to his feet, his hair rising like the quills of a porcupine. He jerked his automatic from its pocket. A single bound took him to the door. Opening it, he stepped out into the hall. Silence there. Silence save for the howling of the storm and the machine gun powder of the rain as it beat against the roof. A draft swept through the narrow passageway. The bracket lamp guttered and smoked. Its flickering caused fantastic shadows to leap and dance upon the plastered walls. For an instant he stopped and listened, his heart beating like a trip hammer. Far in the rear was an open door. He approached the door on tiptoe. Through it came a feeble, flickering light. He stopped just outside. Again, the sinister silence, and then a dull, throaty, bestial growl, the growl of a wild animal that's worrying its prey and defies interference. He leaped through the opening. The scene etched itself upon his brain with photographic clearness. The window broken, the glass scattered upon the floor. Through the opening, the wind howled and roared, and the rain splattered. A table covered with partly filled dishes. Upon it, a glass kerosene lamp, its chimney knocked off and broken, the pieces scattered over the oilcloth-covered tabletop and upon the rough board floor. A huge cook stove in which a wood fire spit and crackled in emulation of the storm outside. The stove door was open. The dancing flames cast a metal glow over the whole interior. Just inside the door lay Kritz. His crutches were by his side. His fat, chemical-stained fingers grasped the handle of his revolver. His throat was torn. On the other side of the room lay a girl. In life, she must have been very beautiful. Now her clothes were torn, her flesh bruised and mangled. Over her crouched a monster, a sodden man-beast with long black matted hair and tangled beard. He was clad only in undershirt and overalls. From them the water dripped in a glistening flood to mingle with the crimson on the floor. He was barefooted, bareheaded. His sharp fangs were buried in the round throat of the girl, while from his lips came the dull bestial growl that Tucker had heard before. The monster raised his shaggy head and glared at the newcomer. Tucker involuntarily noted the wound in the other's shoulder where Kritz's bullet had found its mark. From it the blood was oozing down over the front of his wet, dirty shirt. For an instant, neither of them made a move. Tucker was benumbed with fear. On all fours the beast backed away from his prey. His blood-stained lips were drawn back over his yellowed fangs. From the corners of his mouth drooled a slaver. His long fingers worked spasmodically. He gathered himself for a spring. The lawyer tried to raise his gun. His arms were leaden. He was hypnotized. The thing crept toward him. From his throat came a queer, whining noise, half yelp, half growl. Suddenly he launched himself. The lawyer threw up his arms to protect his face. At the same time, his finger involuntarily pressed the trigger. He saw the flame spurt from the muzzle of his gun. The huge body landed. He felt fingers feeling for his throat. They closed over his windpipe in a throttling grasp. He went down in a heap. And then came oblivion. When Tucker opened his eyes, the storm was still howling and raging. There was a weight upon his legs. By the light of the dancing fire, he saw there was the body of the monster. He dragged himself from beneath it. Between the eyes was a small, round, black hole edged with crimson. The body of Kritz lay where it had fallen. Across the room, the girl stared glassily ceilingward. He leaped to his feet and ran shrieking from that accursed place. His car was where he had left it. Bareheaded, coatless, the rain smashing down on him in a veritable cloudburst. He jerked open the door and, leaping inside, he jammed his foot upon the starter. He was still screaming hysterically as he twisted the wheel to the right with all his strength and threw in the clutch. The machine leaped ahead as if it, too, shared the terror of the night. The heavens were torn with the fury of the elements. Close behind him, something crashed. The odor of sulfur was wafted to his nostrils. Upon his windshield was reflected a great light. He turned his head. The lightning had struck the old house, and the flames were mounting toward the sky. He turned the corner onto the graveled road and fled through the darkness and the storm like a man accursed. The ravening monster. Yeah, I'm going to take a killer and a mad dog, and I'm going to blend them together and see what I get. Anyway, I was in 1934's Weird Tales, Volume 20, Number 3, for those keeping track.